Alright, so this one's kind of a weird animal. No pun intended. And watching it, I'm sitting there thinking, how the hell am I going to review this movie? Because in terms of traditional review, there are not a lot of, I guess what you would call talking points about it. I can't kind of go down this checklist of does it do this, does it do this, does it do this, does it do this, does it do this. Because it's a very simple movie. Very simplistic. And that works to its credit. So we're going to do the best we can. This may be one of the shortest drive home reviews since I began them, and I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. I mean, I do tend to ramble on. Anyway, so in case you haven't heard of it, this film from executive producer Robert Redford, one of the last, great Hollywood legends, and one of the, I guess you would call him one of the last true Hollywood cowboys, one of these guys who thinks being a cowboy will solve everything. So this film is about a prisoner named Roman Coleman, interesting name, who gets involved with a prison horse training program where the inmates train horses who are going to be auctioned off to either local farmers or border patrol or things of that nature to raise money for the program. And along the way they're supposed to it's supposed to help them with their rehabilitation and so on and so forth. So early on, Roman Coleman kind of gains a fascination. I don't know what you'd call it. I guess fascination would be the best term. With a wild Mustang that's kind of kept in seclusion. It's a bit more wild, a bit more angry, more temperamental than a lot of the others. So I'm going to adjust this for a second. There we go. Look at that. So it's having a lot of problems, and I guess because he's supposed to be one of these inmates that has kind of the same issue, he forms a fascination with this horse, and eventually he and the horse form a bond, and so on and so on and so on. So it's not, in terms of storytelling, it's not the most original of tales. You can kind of guess where it's going. And for the first chunk of it, for a good chunk of it, I was not thoroughly impressed. The movie keeps its metaphor right there on the surface. It's not subtle in what it's doing or the juxtaposition of the Mustang and Roman Coleman and their various situations. What gets Roman's attention is he hears this kind of bang, bang, bang as the horse is kicking its stall. And then later in the film, when he's in isolation for, I forget what they put him in isolation for that time, and he's got nothing to do, he's kicking the wall and all that. So, the movie is not subtle in that respect. Oh, look, he's confined by his anger and he can't be tamed or broken to form a better bond with his estranged daughter, just like this horse can't be broken, and they're both, just so uncontrollable they got to be put in isolation. It's, again, very, very obvious. Another thing about this movie, which I usually hate, or at least, I should rephrase it, I hate it when it's not done well. For instance, I enjoyed it when it was done in Aftermath, but I hate it when it's done in a lot of the independent films I see. It's hard to gauge a performance out of this because there's not a lot of performing going on. There's a lot of reacting, and that is acting. Mr. Lawrence's number 2 rule of theater: acting is reacting. So there's a lot of, Coleman reacting to the animal, and the animal reacting to him. and the bond slowly growing. But in terms of connection with other characters or whatnot, there's not a lot in terms of dialogue or great performances. It's all done kind of quietly and just kind of showing his progression with the horse. Now, again, in a lot of films, I would hate this. And for a while there in this one, it was kind of like, okay, I get it. But then again, Robert Redford, while he didn't direct this film or star in it, a lot of his movies are very visual. You know, they really rely on that visual storytelling. So it fits with his, you know, his kind of creative voice. And here's the funny thing. I'll be damned if it wasn't effective. Because, again, I was originally not going to enjoy it. I wasn't going to give this film a great review. It wasn't terrible. But something happens while watching this movie. And I'm not sure when it happens. I'm not sure how it happens. But you begin to really get invested in the character's journey. All the characters, even the ones that don't have a lot of lines and you really don't know their personalities that well, but you get to know them, you feel like you get to know them just from the visual cues, which is fascinating. Because I think that's something a lot of independent movies go for, but they don't actually achieve. They think they're telling you a lot by sticking the camera in one place and just having the actor stare blankly into it. But this one, and I don't know who gets the credit for this, whether it's the director, the cinematographer, or the actors, or some combination of all three, most likely some combination of all three. But somehow the visual means of storytelling really pay off here. You really get a sense of, of, you know, the character's journey and the relationship with the horse, and how Roman Coleman is a changed man from when we saw him at the beginning of the movie to where he eventually gets. There's a really great moment in the film because they're raising these horses again for auction. So you know that they don't get to keep the horses, you know. And there's a scene with one of the characters whom they don't call by name until like the very end of the movie, where he's riding his horse gets bought, and he is helping them get the horse into the wagon to take it away. And just the heartbreak on his face at his horse leaving, it's gut-wrenching, and I don't believe there's a music cue going with it. It's all just him reacting. Same thing, there's a great moment with Roman Coleman where I keep calling him by his name because I cannot remember the actor's name. He's one of these character actors who's in a lot of films but doesn't really have name recognition, so I'm sorry about that. Where he's trying to make a connection with the horse, trying to get the horse to let him touch him, and the horse doesn't want to, and there's just a scene where he gets so frustrated he plops down, you know, just sits, and the horse comes up behind him and kind of puts his head down, and the look of gratitude and of accomplishment on Roman's face. I mean, again, all done with reactions, not done with a lot of dialogue. So somehow this movie did it. I don't know how. It's kind of miraculous, really, because yeah, you felt like you knew the characters. You felt like you were there with them. You felt the pride. It's almost like being a teacher at a graduation. You know, when one of your students goes across, you know, the stage there, and you feel that momentary kind of rush of, wow, I helped do that. And while you don't feel like you helped train the horse, you kind of feel like, wow, you know, yay, you guys. I don't know how it did it. Is it a great movie? Is it a perfect movie? No. There's a bizarre subplot about Roman being forced to smuggle drugs for somebody, and one of the other writers in the program is smuggling drugs, and he ends up getting killed for it, and Roman beats the shit out of the guy who did it. It's a subplot that really doesn't go anywhere, and I'm not sure what the point was, aside from to show us kind of the harsh reality of what it's like to be in prison, but the film already does that. You know, I don't think I needed to be told more how harsh the prison is. It's, you know, I also like that the film doesn't offer an easy answer, that, you know, he works with his horse and all his sins are forgiven. You know, the movie makes no bones about the fact that he is guilty of his crime, that he did it. It was a violent crime. And this is more kind of a movie of him taking the first steps towards maybe becoming better. You know, the movie doesn't, you know, doesn't have the balls or the pretentiousness to say this fixed all his problems. It was saying this helped him, or it might help him. You know, because the movie doesn't give you really a definite yay or nay. He's still in prison when the movie ends, so you're like, okay, you know, maybe. You know, it ends hopefully. I also have to give a big shout out to the director in terms of the visual style. There's some. This movie is simultaneously brutal and dusty and dirty and unpleasant and confined, because it's taking place in a maximum security prison. And yet the shots are composed quite beautifully. You know, much in the same way a painter would frame a shot. You know, I know that's mixing my metaphors there, but it's the truth. So, big shout out to the director. You know that if Robert Redford's directing it, that had to have been a criteria for directing it, because he loves those types of. Oh, Drew! Oh no! Oh, honey! We got to come up with a better seating arrangement, you guys. I mean, this isn't working. I've been too lucky at the claw machine. Anyway, so yeah, a movie that I wasn't thinking I was going to enjoy or feel like I was going to get any kind of catharsis out of, but I'll be damned if it didn't do it. Be damned if it didn't happen. So, yeah, again, I'm not sure. I don't think there's much more to talk about in terms of this film. Again, not a lot of talking points. The plot is very straightforward. The metaphor is very straightforward. I would say, if I have to rate the performances are pretty good, especially when you have to do so much of it just through reaction. And a lot of times reaction to something that is not aware that it's giving you anything to react off of. What I mean is, if you're doing a scene with another actor, they know that you're reacting off of them, and they're giving you things to react off of. That's what it means when someone says they're a giving actor. Here, the guy is doing so much of his work with the horse. And the horse doesn't, you know, I'm sure it's a trained Hollywood horse, but it still doesn't know what it's supposed to do. It doesn't know that the actor is waiting for him to give it an acting cue or something like that. The horse is just being a horse, or doing the tricks it's been trained to do. So the fact that our lead, Roman, and a lot of the other actors have to react off a horse that, you know, again, doesn't know what it's supposed to be doing scene to scene, that's pretty impressive. So yeah, so on the whole, a good movie, a surprisingly good movie. Final grade for this one, I'm gonna go a B minus. Gonna go a B minus on this one, and the reason for that is because it is good, but the unnecessary subplot takes away from time we could have used maybe establishing some of these characters a little bit. And again, metaphor and everything is just right there on the surface. It's not subtle, and I think maybe the film might have benefited from a little bit more subtlety. Just my opinion. But a solid B minus. If you like horses, you'll enjoy this film. It has the feeling and the spirit out of an old-timey Western. You know, like a weathered old Western kind of coming out. So that's a neat kind of feel, without being a proper Western. So yeah, B- on this one. All right. So I had to dig deep to find a movie to see this week. Next week, that's not going to be a problem, because it's time. The film that has been kind of looming large over 2019. From the moment that snap was heard, we all were waiting to see how this would unfold. So next week, The Avengers. So here we go, folks. Let's see how they wrap all this up. So until next time, drive safe, and I'll see you at the movies.